The message came in at 6:12 in the morning. Just one line from my brother, the kind that doesn't ask, doesn't explain, just tells you your life is about to change whether you like it or not. I read it twice, then a third time, and something about it didn't sit right. Not the money, not the inheritance. It was the way he said, "Pack your things," like I didn't have a choice. Like whatever came next had already been decided without me. I'm 73 years old, and I've learned to trust that feeling when something sounds off. It's the same feeling I had the night our father didn't come home, back in 1968, when the police knocked and my brother Daniel stood behind me, smiling like he already knew how the story would end. Daniel was always like that. A step ahead, a little too calm when things went wrong. We grew up in a small house outside Cleveland. Nothing special. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that always smelled like burnt coffee and wet wood. Our father worked construction, hard man, quiet, not much for affection. Our mother, she softened the edges, but she died early. Cancer left the 2 of us alone with a man who didn't know how to raise boys without turning them into something sharp. Daniel adapted. I didn't. He learned how to talk his way through trouble, how to charm people just enough to get what he needed. I stayed honest, or maybe just slower. Either way, by the time we were both grown, he had money, connections, a life that looked clean from the outside. I had a modest pension, a small house in Pennsylvania, and a habit of keeping my distance from him. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years before that message. I just inherited $3 million from our family. Pack your things and come to Chicago. We need to talk. Our family. That part bothered me more than anything. There wasn't much left of our family to inherit. Our father died 15 years ago, and what little he had barely covered his debts. No hidden accounts. No land. Nothing that would turn into $3 million overnight. I handled the paperwork myself. I made sure of it. So where did that money come from? And why was Daniel suddenly acting like I owed him something? I sat at the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, the morning light barely coming through the curtains. My house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that lets old memories crawl back in. I thought about ignoring him. Would have been easier. But then another message came through. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You need to be here by tomorrow. Not, please, not, can you? You need to be here. I felt that old weight settle in my chest. The same one I used to feel as a kid when Daniel made decisions for both of us, and I went along just to keep the peace. Only this time, something told me. If I went, there wouldn't be any peace waiting on the other side. I didn't pack much. At my age, you learn what matters and what doesn't. A couple of shirts, my medications, an old photograph of my parents that I kept tucked inside a book I never finished. I locked the house the same way I always did. Slow, deliberate, like I might not be coming back. The drive to Chicago took just under 6 hours, long enough for doubt to settle in, then harden into something heavier. I kept thinking about that word again, family. Daniel didn't use words carelessly. If he said something like that, it meant he wanted me to believe it, whether it was true or not. By the time I hit the outskirts of the city, the sky had gone gray. Chicago always felt colder than it should, even in decent weather. Too much glass, too much steel. No softness to it. Daniel texted me an address. Not a home, an office building downtown. That was my first sign something wasn't right. I parked across the street and sat there for a minute, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. I could see people moving inside through the tall windows. Suits, briefcases, the kind of place where everything looks clean but nothing feels honest. Daniel wasn't a corporate man, never had been. He liked control, but on his terms. Small deals, quiet money, things that didn't leave a paper trail. So why was he here? I went in anyway. The lobby smelled like polished stone and expensive perfume. A young woman at the front desk looked up at me with that polite smile people give when they're trying to figure out if you belong. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here for Daniel Carter," I said. Her smile tightened just a little, not enough for most people to notice. But I did. Of course. He's expecting you. Take the elevator to the 14th floor. Expecting me. That sat wrong, too. Like this had all been arranged before I even read the message. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. My reflection in the metal doors looked older than I remembered. Thinner, more tired. For a second, I almost turned around right there. But the doors opened before I could make that choice. The hallway upstairs was quiet. Too quiet. Thick carpet, muted lights, glass offices on either side. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly open. I knew it was his before I even stepped closer. Daniel had a way of occupying space, even when he wasn't speaking. I pushed the door open. He was standing by the window, looking out over the city like he owned it. Same posture I remembered from years ago. Hands behind his back, shoulders relaxed, like nothing in the world could touch him. He didn't turn right away. "You took your time," he said. "No hello, no welcome. Just that same old tone." "I drove 6 hours," I replied. He nodded once, still facing the window. "You're here now. That's what matters." I stepped further into the room, closing the door behind me. There was a desk, a few chairs, and a man I didn't recognize sitting quietly in the corner, watching us like he'd been there the whole time. I felt it then, that shift in the air. This wasn't a reunion. "Daniel," I said slowly, "what is this?" He finally turned to face me, and for the first time since I'd walked in, he smiled. It wasn't warm, it wasn't brotherly. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you already know how this is going to end, and they don't. "You always did ask too many questions," he said. "Sit down, we've got paperwork to go through." I didn't move. "What paperwork?" That's when the man in the corner spoke for the first time. "Mr. Carter," he said calmly, "your brother's cooperation is required, one way or another." Something cold moved through my chest. I looked back at Daniel, and that's when I realized this had nothing to do with inheritance. I stayed standing. At my age, you don't sit just because someone tells you to, not when something feels wrong in your bones. I looked from Daniel to the man in the corner, then back again, trying to understand what kind of situation I'd just walked into. "Cooperation?" I said. "You bring me 6 hours out of my life for paperwork and talk like that?" Daniel sighed, like I was the one making things difficult. "Don't start, Harold. Just sit down." I hadn't heard my name come out of his mouth like that in years. Flat, impatient, like I was a problem he needed to manage. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "Not until someone explains what the hell is going on." The man in the corner stood up slowly. Mid-50s, maybe. Clean suit, no tie. The kind of face that didn't give anything away. Not anger, not sympathy, just control. "That's fair," he said. "You deserve some context." Daniel didn't like that. I saw it in his jaw tightening, the way his shoulders pulled just a little straighter. But he didn't stop him. "That money your brother mentioned," the man continued. "It's real, $3 million, recently transferred through a family trust." I shook my head. "There is no trust." "There is now." That answer hung in the room like a bad smell. I turned to Daniel. "You want to explain that?" He finally moved away from the window, slow, measured steps, like he'd rehearsed this whole thing in his head before I ever got here. "It's not from Dad," he said. "It's from Mom's side." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Our mother didn't have anything," I said. "You know that." Daniel gave a small shrug. "That's what we were told." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "that things were hidden, managed. There were assets we didn't know about, accounts, property. It's complicated." "No," I said quietly. "It's not complicated. It's a lie." The room went still. Daniel's eyes darkened just a little. "Careful." I ignored that. "I handled the estate." I saw every document. There was nothing. You expect me to believe money just appeared out of nowhere? The man stepped in again, smooth, controlled. Not nowhere, just somewhere you weren't looking. That didn't sit right either. I looked at him. Who are you? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Someone helping your brother finalize things. What things? Daniel exhaled, like he was tired of circling around it. The transfer, he said. The full release of the funds. I frowned. You already said you inherited it. I did, he said, but it's not complete. That word again. Complete. What does that mean? Daniel hesitated, just for a second. And in that second, I saw something I hadn't seen in him since we were kids. Uncertainty. Then it was gone. It means, he said, I need your signature. I felt the ground shift under me. For what? He walked over to the desk and picked up a folder. Thick. Too thick for something simple. He opened it, flipped it around, and slid it toward me. I didn't touch it. What is it, Daniel? His voice softened then. Not warmer, just quieter. It's a confirmation, he said, that you waive any claim to the estate. I let out a slow breath. There is no estate, I said. There is now, he repeated. I looked down at the papers without picking them up. Legal language, dense, deliberate. The kind of thing designed so most people wouldn't read past the first page. I'm not signing this, I said. Daniel's expression didn't change. I wasn't asking. That's when the man beside him spoke again, a little less polite this time. Mr. Carter, he said, this process is going to move forward. The only question is whether you choose to make it easy or difficult. I felt it then, clear as day. This wasn't about family. This wasn't about inheritance. This was pressure. And Daniel, my own brother, was sitting there letting it happen. I looked at him one more time. Tell me the truth, I said. All of it, right now. For a moment, I thought he might. His eyes flickered, just slightly. But then he leaned back, folded his hands, and said something that made my stomach drop. You were never supposed to question it, Harold. I didn't say anything right away. At my age, silence can carry more weight than shouting. I just stood there, looking at him. Really looking this time. The same face I grew up with, same eyes, same crooked line in his jaw. But there was something else now. Something colder. Like whatever used to be my brother had been filed down into something more efficient. You were never supposed to question it, I repeated. Daniel didn't flinch. That's right. I let out a slow breath through my nose. Then you don't know me at all. That earned a faint smile from him. But it wasn't amusement. It was patience. The kind you use on someone you believe is already beaten. You always needed things explained, he said. Even when it didn't help you. And you always thought you were smarter than everyone else, I replied. The man beside him shifted slightly, like he was getting tired of the back and forth. Gentlemen, he said, we're drifting. I ignored him. Daniel, I said, quieter now. What did you do? That hit something. Just for a second, his eyes moved. Not away, but inward, like he was checking something behind the surface. Nothing illegal, he said. That wasn't the answer I asked for. What did you do? I repeated. He picked up the folder again, tapping it lightly with his fingers. I found what was ours, he said, and I made sure it stayed that way. That's not how you talk about family, I said. That's exactly how you talk about family, he snapped, sharper now. You protect what's yours. At my expense. He didn't answer that. The silence stretched just long enough to say everything. I looked down at the papers again, then finally reached out and picked them up. The weight of them surprised me, not physically, but what they represented. Years of something hidden, moved, arranged. There were names in there I didn't recognize. Account numbers, transfers, legal language tied in knots so tight it was hard to tell where one sentence ended and the next began. But one thing was clear. My name was everywhere, not as a beneficiary, as an obstacle. I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not anger, not fear. Something quieter, final. "You've been planning this," I said. Daniel didn't deny it. "For how long?" "A while." "A while," I repeated. "Months? Years?" He gave a small shrug. "Long enough." I looked up at him. "And you thought I'd just sign it?" "I knew you would," he said. That stopped me. "You knew?" He nodded toward the man beside him. "People are predictable, Harold. You live alone, fixed income, no real support system. You'd see a number like 3 million, and eventually, you'd convince yourself it was easier to let it go." I stared at him, not because he was wrong, but because of how easily he said it, like he'd reduced my entire life to a few lines on a page. "You really believe that?" I said. "I know it," he replied. The man stepped closer then, lowering his voice just a touch. "This doesn't need to be unpleasant," he said. "Sign the documents and you walk away with a generous settlement. Enough to make your remaining years comfortable." Remaining years. I let that sit. "I'm not dying yet," I said. He gave a polite smile. "Of course not. But time has a way of narrowing options." There it was, not a threat. Not exactly, but close enough. I set the folder back down on the desk, carefully, like it might explode if I moved too fast. "No," I said. Daniel's expression didn't change. "No, I'm not signing anything." The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Heavier, less patient. The man sighed softly. "Mr. Carter," I cut him off. "You brought me here under false pretenses. You talk about family like it's a business deal, and you expect me to just hand over whatever this is without a fight?" Daniel's voice dropped, low and controlled. "You don't want to fight." I looked at him. "No," I said. "I don't." A pause. Then I added, just as calm. "But I'm not afraid of one either." Something shifted in his face then. Not anger. Something tighter. More personal. And for the first time since I walked into that room, he looked at me like he wasn't entirely sure anymore. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. "You should be." I didn't respond. I just stood there, waiting. Because deep down, I knew whatever he was about to say next was the real reason he needed me in that room at all. Daniel didn't rush it. That's what I remember most. The way he took his time, like he wanted the moment to settle in before he said it. He walked back to the window, hands behind his back again, looking out over the city like he was about to explain the weather instead of whatever this really was. "You always thought it was about money," he said quietly. "That's why you're confused." "I'm not confused," I replied. "I just don't believe you." He nodded slightly, like that answer fit into something he already expected. "That's the problem," he said. "You never saw the bigger picture." I felt my patience thinning. "Then stop talking around it and say what you mean." The man in the corner stayed silent this time. Even he seemed to understand. This part belonged to Daniel. Daniel turned slowly, his eyes settling on me in a way that felt different. Not cold, not sharp, certain. "The money isn't the inheritance," he said. I frowned. "Then what is?" "It's the cover." That landed harder than anything else he'd said so far. "For what?" I asked. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "For what Dad left behind." I shook my head immediately. "Dad left nothing." That's what he wanted you to believe. Something in my chest tightened. Not because I believed him, but because of how steady he sounded. "He didn't trust you," Daniel continued. "He never did." "That's not true." "It is," he said. "You were too straight, too honest. You would have asked questions. You would have gone to the wrong people." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Daniel glanced briefly at the man beside him, then back at me. "Before he died," he said, "Dad moved something. Not money. Something else. Something that doesn't exist on paper the way you think it does. A cold feeling crept up the back of my neck. What kind of something? Daniel held my gaze. Leverage. The word sat there, heavy, unclear, but wrong in a way I couldn't ignore. You're saying Dad was hiding something illegal? I asked. I'm saying, Daniel replied, that he knew things about people, deals, accounts. Enough to protect himself and us. That's insane. No, he said calmly. What's insane is that you never wondered how he kept us afloat all those years after Mom died. I opened my mouth, then stopped. Because the truth was, I had wondered, just never out loud. He wasn't just a construction worker, Daniel said. Not really. My grip tightened slightly on the back of the chair beside me. Then what was he? Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the folder, pulled out a single document, and held it up. Everything ties back to one thing, he said. One account, one set of records, and legally, it belongs to both of us. I felt my stomach drop. That's why you need me, I said. He nodded once. Yes. And if I don't sign? His expression didn't change. Then it stays locked, frozen, useless to anyone. I let out a slow breath. So this whole thing, the 3 million, the office, him. I nodded toward the other man. It's all just pressure. It's structure, Daniel corrected. We're doing this properly. No, I said quietly. You're trying to box me in. For the first time, there was a flicker of irritation in his eyes. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, I said again. You already said that. I stepped closer to the desk, looking down at the papers, then back at him. You don't want my share, I said. He didn't respond. You want access, I continued. Full access, and the only way to get it is through me. Silence. That was all the answer I needed. I looked at him, really looked this time. My brother, the kid who used to sleep in the bed across from mine, who used to steal my socks and blame it on me, who once cried when our dog died and swore he'd never lie to me again. Gone. Replaced by someone who had been planning this, building it, waiting for the right moment to pull me back in. You set this up, I said softly. All of it. Daniel didn't deny it. I prepared, he said. For what? For the day you'd have to choose. I felt something shift in me then. Something quiet, but solid. What choice? I asked. His voice dropped, almost gentle now. Family, or everything else. I held his gaze, and after a long pause, I said the only thing that made sense anymore. You already made that choice, Daniel. Something in his face tightened. Just slightly, but enough. Then he said something I'll never forget. No, he said quietly. I made sure you don't get to avoid it. And that's when I realized this was never about getting me to sign. It was about making sure I couldn't walk away. I didn't answer him. Not right away. At 73, you learn that some moments don't need words. They need time to settle. I stood there in that office, looking at my brother, feeling the weight of everything he'd just said pressed down on something old inside me. Something I hadn't touched in years. You can't walk away, he said again, quieter this time. I let out a slow breath. You sound just like him, I said. Daniel frowned. Like who? Dad. That landed harder than I expected. For a second, the room shifted. Not physically, but something in Daniel's posture changed. A small thing, almost nothing. He did what he had to do, Daniel said. So do you, right? I replied. Yes. No hesitation. That was the difference between us. I looked down at the papers one last time, then reached out and closed the folder gently, sliding it back across the desk toward him. I'm not signing, I said. The man beside him exhaled through his nose, already annoyed. Daniel didn't move. You don't understand what you're refusing, he said. I understand enough. No, he said, sharper now. You don't. This isn't just money. This is protection, access, control. You think you can just go back to your little house and pretend none of this exists? Yes, I said. His jaw tightened. You can't, he said. I met his eyes. Watch me. That's when the room changed. Not in words, in feeling. The man stepped closer, voice low. Mr. Carter, I think you're underestimating the situation. I turned to him. No, I think you're overestimating your leverage. Daniel moved then, fast enough to break the stillness. Enough, he said. We both looked at him. His breathing had changed, not out of control, but heavier, like something was slipping. You walk out that door, he said, and you don't come back. I nodded. That was already true. Silence. Real silence this time. The kind that doesn't wait for a response. I picked up my coat from the chair, slow, steady, same way I'd locked my house that morning. No rush, no panic, just final. You're making a mistake, Daniel said behind me. I paused at the door, hand on the handle. For you or for me? I asked. He didn't answer. I opened the door. The hallway was just as quiet as before. Same soft carpet, same dim lights, like nothing had happened at all. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. No one followed. Not right away. I made it to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. My reflection stared back at me again, older than I felt that morning. The doors opened. I stepped inside. Just before they closed, I heard footsteps, fast, and Daniel's voice. Not calm this time. Harold, wait! I didn't move. The doors slid shut between us, but the last thing I saw, just before they sealed, wasn't anger. It wasn't control. It was something else. Something I hadn't seen in him since we were boys. Fear. The elevator started down, and halfway to the lobby, it stopped. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. There's more to come.